Invaders from Mars, capturing humans at will for their own sinister purposes, turning them into diabolical instruments of destruction. Invaders from Mars, weird, fantastic beings of a superintelligence, ruling a race of synthetic humans and pitting them against mankind's dream to conquer the universe.
Something extraordinary is zooming through our cosmic backyard right now. It's called Atlas, or Comet 31, and it's the third confirmed interstellar object to ever enter our solar system. Is it just a comet, or could it be something far more mysterious? This thing was spotted on July 1st, 2025 by the Atlas survey in Chile, and basically it came in from interstellar space at blistering speed, over 130,000 miles per hour. On a kind of hyperbolic, non-return trajectory. It's heading straight through, swinging closest to the sun around late October, right about when the Earth is on the opposite side, making observation tricky. The latest estimates basically put its size to be between 3.5 to 7 miles wide. It's possibly the largest interstellar object we've ever seen. Observations by the James Webb Space Telescope suggest that it has a very high carbon dioxide ratio compared to water. Preliminary data suggests that it's from the Milky Way's thick disk, potentially making it billions of years older than our 4.6 billion year old solar system. So this thing is coming in hot and it's ancient. Some of you will remember that I had the good fortune to interview the Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb. Paul Giamatti and I interviewed him for our podcast Chinwag. Go and listen to that interview. We did a two-parter with him. He's a fascinating character, and I think you'll find his theories to be remarkable. He's a kind of considered on the fringe by some, and others consider him just to be doing really open-minded kinds of scientific questions. But Avi Loeb and his colleagues have sort of raised a provocative question. This comet is aligning with the planetary orbital plane and sort of passing near Venus, Mars, and Jupiter with incredible precision. In fact, Avi Loeb thinks it's almost sort of improbable levels of precision, raising the question, could this be other than just a regular comet? It basically also lacks a classic comet tail. Instead, telescopes detect a kind of strange glow in front of it, not behind it, which is a highly unexpected feature. Avi Loeb suggests we must keep all options open, from it being a natural comet to something maybe intentionally crafted. Possibly a reconnaissance probe, even with hostile potential. Okay, that's kind of panicky, but I guess like my feeling about this is if we're all willing to say the thing which we say now, which is there must be life out there, then why should we be so skeptical when somebody comes along and says, well, what would it look like if it was coming to look at us? What kind of a shape and structure would it have? And what kind of sort of trajectory would it embody if it was consciously intentional? It's at least worth considering. Critics, however, and that's the majority of the scientific community, they still think this is just a standard interstellar comet. The chemical composition and the way it's behaving still fits within what we know about comet behavior, although observations are ongoing. So what does it all mean? Like, from a philosophical point of view, there's some interesting kind of elements here. Like when something behaves strange in nature, do we treat it as a kind of improbable accident or as evidence of some kind of design or conscious intentionality? This is one of the oldest debates in philosophy. The human mind, it craves patterns. But patterns can mislead us because a lot of patterns basically are just accidents. So this is an interesting question between what's a signal and what's a coincidence. Suppose this comet Atlas really does line up with planetary orbits, like in an extremely rare way. Is that a signal of intelligent design? Or is that just a kind of coincidence that happens in a vast universe? And I'm reminded of David Hume. David Hume writes this wonderful little book. I wouldn't say it's readable, but it's short. It's called The Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion. Highly recommended. And in that book, he says, what would it take for a non-believer to start believing in God? And he says, it would have to be some kind of signal. And then he says, well, what kind of signal would count? And he says, imagine if you heard the voice of God, just like right now. Just all of a sudden, we're just sitting in our houses, we're watching YouTube, and all of a sudden we heard this booming, superhuman voice. We look around and we're like, what the hell is that? Nobody seems to be playing a trick on us. It doesn't seem to be some glitch in my computer or my TV. And the voice, then we find out when we go to the news, was heard by all people in all different languages. So in India, people heard the voice in Hindi. In China, people heard the voice in Mandarin. And then we unpack, what did the voice say? And it had the same basic message. Would that be enough for you to sort of fall on your knees and be like, there's a God, and God is talking to us and telling us, I don't know what the message is, let's say it's like, be nicer to people or something. Or could you still hold out and say, yeah, it's very compelling evidence, but what if it's just like a really diabolical troll who's trolling us using high-tech Wi-Fi internet technology to make us all hear the same voice in our native language, and it seems like it's God, but it's not a signal, it's a practical joke. I mean, you wouldn't be able to say it's the wind, whipping through the clouds anymore. It's not that kind of coincidence, but you could still deny that it was God. However, can you deny that there's some intentionality behind it, either by a prankster or possibly aliens playing some kind of trick on us? In other words, when is it just a coincidence? When is it evidence of a signal? And then when is it a signal of a certain kind, like a divine signal versus alien versus something else? So even when the signal seems kind of clear and obvious, we still have to interpret what the signal means, and that's how we get the kind of introduction of skepticism. Is the divine voice a kind of collective hallucination, or is it really the thing? Is this comet Atlas flying in possibly some kind of surveillance mission from an alien intelligence outside our solar system? Or is it just a plain old comet and it just looks like it's lining up with the planets and coming at us? The philosophical tension really is like, what threshold of improbability do we cross from that's weird to that must be intentional? And Hume really loved this problem. He was always talking about it. Human beings are notoriously bad at distinguishing like true design from random accident. If this comet coming in really is a probe or a craft of some kind, then of course it would mark the first time in history that humans encountered direct evidence of another intelligence, which is something that we're willing to accept in principle. That would force us to rethink our anthropocentrism, where we see ourselves as the center of the universe. I think we wouldn't just be observers of the universe, we'd also be observed. There's another philosophical question here too, which is one of epistemology, like what can we know? When do we have good evidence? What constitutes good evidence? Science basically says we should be cautious. So extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But our friend Avi Loeb at Harvard is saying, let's at least push the more radical questions to see whether there's anything to it. And that's kind of a bolder style of sort of conjecture and refutation. So whether this comet Atlas turns out to be an interstellar comet or something more exotic, it's already pressing us to confront timeless questions in philosophy. What counts as a sign? When do coincidences become communication? How can we balance like an open imagination with scientific rigor? Hume reminds us that even if we heard like a loud voice in the sky telling us something noble, the issue really comes with how we interpret that data. So it's good to balance a kind of imaginative leap of explanation, something that sort of contains our emotional side, like we really want to see aliens, or maybe you're afraid of aliens, whatever it is. Those kind of imaginative hypothesis abductions, as we call them, we have to balance those with scientific rigor so that we also keep our heads and don't sort of like jump to conclusions. Maybe this thing is just ice and rock hurtling at us through space. Maybe it's something more. But either way, it reminds us that we live in a universe of vast strangeness, where meaning and mystery are always tangled up together. Some of you may know this trilogy of science fiction books by a Chinese writer named Cixin Liu. Great books, really wonderful science fiction. The Three-Body Problem, And then I think the dark forest is one I really like. That's the second one. I think it's in the dark forest where it's something like this is the scenario. There's an alien force coming to Earth to basically take over our planet. And as it's coming, there's this kind of funny response to it. So I was thinking about it when we were talking about this new comet Atlas entering our solar system, because even if it was an alien, there's still the way you need to interpret their intentions. So they could be coming in a benign, benevolent way. They could be coming in a malevolent way. And it's funny, in this novel, there are people who are afraid that it's going to wipe out the world. There's people who think they're going to be benevolent. And then there's people who think they're going to wipe out human beings, but they're so misanthropic and they hate human beings so much that they welcome the sort of annihilation of the human species. This is a deep level of cynicism, although I know lots of people like this. I don't know how sort of serious they are about this level of cynicism. Maybe it's only skin deep, and if you put them under duress, they would want to fight for the human race. But there's a lot of people I know who are like, man, the worst thing on this planet is human beings, and they need to be sort of wiped off the planet, and so that the planet can sort of live free. And so bring on the worst you can do, aliens. Not my position. I'm kind of a fan of human beings, but I know that view's out there. So in any case, we have lots of stuff to interpret here. What would it mean for this comet to not be a comet, but to be basically a product of alien intelligence? And then if it is alien intelligence, is it going to be sort of a good thing for us or a terrible thing for us? These are all things we have to work out ourselves in the way we think about nature and our destiny. All right, as usual, thank you for coming to Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge. Always stay curious.